Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Daniel, and today I wanted to go over the GFX 100 again, go in a little more detail with this body. And I also wanted to talk to you guys about the GF23mm f4. This is a weather-resistant wide-angle lens, and it's an 18mm equivalent on 35mm format. This is actually the widest lens that they have in their lineup, and for what it is, this is one of the sharpest lenses you're going to find in their lineup. Even though it is pretty heavy, it's substantially heavier than most lenses that are this wide. Maybe compared to like a zoom lens, maybe a Canon zoom or another zoom, this is actually very heavy for a prime. And the reason it's so heavy is because there's 12 groups with 15 elements inside the actual lens itself. And with all of those elements, you actually get two aspherical elements, one in front, one in the back. You're also getting 3 ED elements, 1 super ED element. And when you're using the GFX 100, you're actually gonna end up with some pretty stellar images. And because of the low chromatic aberration and to keep ghosting and flaring down, they actually put a nano GI coating on the front element. And when you mount this up onto the actual body, you'll notice that the way that the camera and the lens balance, you can't just sit this lens down because it is actually too heavy for the body to actually hold up on its own. So therefore, the front of the element and the back with the body don't actually balance out very well. So that's just something to keep in mind with this being such a big piece of glass. So in order to use an ND filter, just keep in mind that the front element and the front filter thread is 82mm. One thing that might be hard to show you on camera, but something that is pretty apparent once you start using these two together, is that this lens is able to acquire focus very quickly and quietly. And that's simply because it's attached to the GFX 100. And for most people who've been wondering about the GFX 100, considering the GFX 50S and the 50R weren't necessarily renowned for their autofocus abilities, the GFX 100 took things to a whole different level, especially because it's coming out of such a big body and the fact that it's moving so much glass at the same time with this lens, the autofocus acquires very quickly. Personally, if you're hand-holding this thing and you're actually taking some pictures, whether you're doing some environmental portraits or you're doing some close-up shots, it acquires focus very quickly. And now that you have in-body stabilization in the GFX 100, you actually can hand-hold these shots, and these shots are actually going to be pretty stable at very slow shutter speeds. It's actually pretty incredible how well the in-body stabilization works on this body in particular. And now that the little baby brother X-T4 was announced with in-body stabilization, we're gonna see how the smaller camera works well with this camera if you wanna have an A and B system, whether or not you have a backup Fuji camera. If in the case where I shoot video as well, I may end up putting the X-T4 in my bag just because I know both of those would work very well handheld. One thing that's really good too is that this is a weather resistant lens. All of Fuji's GF lenses in their lineup are designed to be weather resistant. This one is no exception. I've taken this out in wet weather, I've taken this out in the snow, and I've also used it in really hot weather. And so far I've had zero issues with the lens not working, the autofocus works, the zoom works. Everything seems to be in line with me using this thing in rugged conditions. So I can definitely attest to the fact that Fuji's design and weather resistant claims on these lenses, all of them work the way they're supposed to. So if you wanted to control the aperture on the lens itself, it does feature an aperture ring, and it also locks if you want to use controls that are custom on the camera itself, which most photographers like to do. They like to adjust aperture and shutter speed settings. So if you want full control of the lens and use your aperture settings in camera, you would put this on C for custom. If you actually wanted to use it in an automatic mode, then you can put it in A. Both of these settings actually lock in position so you're not accidentally bumping the aperture ring while you're trying to acquire focus. And one thing that's really good as well is at f4, this is actually going to give you some pretty good background blur. Depending on what style of shooting, obviously if you've got a subject that's close to you and you position the camera at a close enough distance where you're still able to get in focus, you're gonna notice that your background separation is actually pretty substantial. This lens will give you a good amount of separation. The same rules still apply even at f4, so the distance to your subject and how much depth there is behind the subject is obviously gonna dictate how much separation you create with any lens. So with this lens at f4, you do actually get a good amount of bokeh in your shot. A few of the things that I've ended up using this lens for have been outdoor photography. So one of the things that I've noticed when I've started printing some of my photos, shooting with this lens in particular, is no matter how big of an image I print or blow up to a size that I want to print out, the amount of resolution and detail, every inch of the image that I'm printing, all of it's there. So I can actually turn one photo into 3 or 4 because there might be a shot where I like a few of the buildings, but I don't like the foreground, or vice versa. Or say there's maybe a situation where there's low contrast and maybe the foreground is actually much better preserved in my shot. I don't want to necessarily print the entire image. I can crop in and the resolution is almost as equal as it is in the whole image. I don't lose detail by cropping in, and that's what I think a lot of people who started using this system have been praising the most, is obviously with more megapixels, you're able to resolve that much more information in an image in a RAW format. And if you shoot this thing at the base ISO, you're actually getting a 16-bit image. A 16-bit RAW image is gonna give you a lot of latitude in post, and it's gonna give you a lot of abilities when you wanna tweak your images out. You're gonna be able to retain that much more information. You have a lot to work with as far as post-processing. Those RAW files are pretty big, but at the end of the day, if you're somebody who likes to spend their time editing their images, this is the camera that's going to give you the most flexibility aside from something a little more higher megapixel or a larger format sensor. So just to give you an idea, the lens is actually, the specifications say that the lens weighs 845 grams. So that's about 30 ounces, just under 2 pounds. Like I said, this is a heavy lens. So if you know that you're working with a heavy lens, and you like the balance of having heavier equipment, which some people do and some people don't mind because either they're shooting on a tripod or simply don't care to have a heavier piece of glass on front of their camera, then keep that in mind that this is going to be a little bit heavier of a setup. So obviously ways around that, if you're hand holding, are you can use your shoulder strap. Another thing is, if you're going to shoot this thing handheld, you can rely on the in-body stabilization that the GFX actually has built in. I know that I've been able to handhold some shots in low light using almost all of their glass, and the shutter speeds that I've been able to actually get away with are pretty impressive. So from what's being said about the pending firmware update that's going to be coming out for the GFX 100 soon, you're actually going to be able to take a 400 megapixel image inside of the camera. So pixel shift exists in a couple of other systems. It'll be interesting to see how they actually make it work on the GFX 100, but I think Fuji had maybe a lot of things that they had probably outside of developing this thing that they said, hey, in the future, we're gonna be able to implement things such as pixel shift or other things like maybe faster resolution in camera for video, which would be great if we can get like a 4K 60 output out of this sensor, or maybe even like a 2K 1080 output. That would be one of the more amazing things that this camera would be able to do. And honestly, I've been shooting video with this thing. I'm pretty impressed by the fact that even with line skipping and pixel binning, it's really hard to tell that the video quality is actually suffering. You have to actually see the footage coming straight out of camera. And even though I do record externally, the 10-bit coming straight out of the camera into the SD card, that quality is top notch. I mean, that feels like a different type of footage. Whenever I'm editing the footage, obviously the file sizes are large because it's a 400 megabit per second bit rate, but the footage itself just has a very, very unique look. The color depth, everything that I'm seeing just straight off the camera, no less when I put this thing on an external recorder like an Atomos Ninja. That's the thing, that's one of the things that I think has blown me away the most about recording video with this camera. I was actually considering just switching up to the C500 Mark II. That's sort of a lingering idea or possibility. But for right now, having as much glass as I have for the Fuji medium format system, I think with the video quality that this has already given me so far, and with more to come, I'm probably just gonna hang on to this and keep using this for a while, see what the firmware updates are gonna be looking like in the future with whatever they decide to implement. I really do hope that on the video side, they do get a little more aggressive and allow for maybe like a faster frame rate setting for 4K 60, like I said, or maybe even 120 frames at like a 2K resolution. That would be amazing. One of the things that, again, besides being able to just shoot 102 megapixels is the versatility of having video as a hybrid system. And I never thought I'd be really getting into the video side heavily with something as powerful as this. Since I've been mainly shooting video with an EOS R and I've been getting away with pretty good 10-bit footage, recording externally there, this actually takes it up about a notch or two. And I hope that you guys will stick around because I'm going to be posting more video samples from this particular body. I want you guys to take a look at maybe some comparison shots that I'll do side by side, along with other vlogs and things that I'm going to be shooting as well. You guys can take a look, see how this footage looks to you, and I'm also going to be posting some photos as well. So some of the shots in downtown, as you can see, that I've taken from a high vantage point are extremely detailed. One of the beautiful things about this camera is the amount of resolution and detail that you can preserve in your shot. You can also see that outside, just in general, with an environmental portrait, this lens is actually very, very capable. When you throw on an ND filter and you maximum daylight and you need to have light cut down through an ND filter, you'll see that this lens still performs admirably. Now, if we're talking about adapting lenses from other systems, then you have to take into account that most of the time those lenses have to be cropped inside of this camera, so you won't even be able to take advantage of the 102 megapixel density anyway. That's why a lot of people do talk about adapting lenses, which I'm all for. But if you really truly want to see what the maximum amount of resolution is going to be out of the camera, you definitely have to stick with the GF lenses because they're designed specifically for this mount. All right guys, so stick around, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing more Fuji reviews with the lenses and the body. I want to be able to demonstrate for you guys why this system is super good at what it does, why Fuji's really going all in on their medium format system, and why I think in the future a lot of people are going to start migrating away from other high-end systems and realize that for the value of what you're getting in the Fuji GFX 100 or the 50, the medium format line that they've developed and delivered to the masses is something that, you know, we never saw coming, but I'm so glad it's here and I'm so glad I actually have a chance to use it. The video quality is amazing and the glass just keeps getting better. So we'll see with their next few releases what that glass looks like. Stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, and I'll bring you guys more content soon. Thank you very much.